Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. A man shouting "Free Palestine" threw firebombs into a crowd at a vigil for Israeli hostages in Boulder, Colorado, injuring 6 elderly people, including 4 women with severe burns. The FBI calls it a targeted act of terror, coming days after 2 Israeli embassy staff were fatally shot in Washington. Russian and Ukrainian officials are to meet today in Istanbul for a second round of direct peace talks, but remain deeply divided as fighting escalates. President Trump urges a deal, warning the US may walk away if both sides refuse to compromise. More than 30 Palestinians are reported dead and 170 injured near a Rafah aid site, with witnesses saying Israeli forces fired on civilians, a claim Israel strongly denies. The US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation insists aid was distributed without any incident. Hamas declares it's immediately ready to resume indirect peace talks for a Gaza ceasefire after recent negotiations stalled. Qatar and Egypt have pledged to step up mediation efforts to break the deadlock. Final results show Nawrocki has won Poland's presidential runoff with 50.89% of votes, defeating Liberal Warsaw Mayor Tarakowski in a tightly fought race. The result signals a shift that could reshape Poland's path within the European Union. The death toll from devastating floods in Mokwa, Nigeria has surged past 200, with 500 people still missing after torrential rains swept through the town. Officials call it the worst flooding in 60 years as survivors recount watching homes and loved ones vanish in the waters. Israel says it targeted Hezbollah's anti-tank and rocket units in drone strikes near the border, killing 2 operatives in Arnon, Atia and Ashab. Lebanese officials confirm additional strikes in Bet Leaf and Bint Jabil as tensions threaten an already fragile ceasefire. French President Emmanuel Macron condemns unacceptable violence that marred PSG's Champions League victory celebrations as he hosts the team at the LC Palace. 2 people died, hundreds were arrested, and a police officer remains in a coma following nationwide clashes. Our top story today, Russia and Ukraine are in Istanbul for a new round of peace talks. The countries returned to the table after weeks of deadlock. Both sides arrived in Istanbul under tight security. Russian media says top diplomats from Moscow and Washington spoke by phone ahead of the talks. Meanwhile, Ukraine wants a ceasefire, prisoner releases, and the return of deported children. Russia is expected to present a memo with its terms, but key differences remain. The talks mark a tense turning point in the war. This meeting comes hours after a major drone strike shook Russia. Ukraine claims it destroyed over 40 military aircraft deep inside the country. President Zelensky calls it Kiev's longest range operation yet. Ukraine says 117 drones were used to hit multiple air bases, and the targets included long-range bombers and radar planes. The strike, codenamed Webb, took over a year to plan. Kiev claims it launched drones from inside Russia itself, with the damage Ukraine says could total $7 billion for Moscow. Let's hear what Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, had to say on the attacks.
Офіс нашої операції на території Росії знаходився безпосередньо поруч з управлінням ФСБ Росії в одній з їхніх областей. Загалом в операції було використано 117 дронів і відповідна кількість операторів дронів працювали. Вражено 34% стратегічних носіїв крилатих ракет на аеродромах базування.
And yes, so we've got the news that both Russian and Ukrainian officials have arrived in the Turkish megacity of Istanbul for these direct peace talks. The second round of direct peace talks after the first a couple of weeks ago, which saw a 1,000 prisoner swap, the largest of the entire war. Obviously, hostilities remain high between the nations. Trust remains low. Ukraine is trying to find a temporary ceasefire. We've seen plans accepted by Ukraine for a temporary ceasefire in the past. Russia has rejected these ceasefire plans. We have, however, seen in the past ceasefires projected from Russia. They included over Easter, in which both sides were they both accused the other of violating them on both sides. And then we saw Moscow's VE Day parade, where there was less accusations of violence. However, there was blasts reported in the Kharkiv region. Once again, Russia said it had no part in them, but that was during the VE Day celebrations. Donald Trump has spoken about these negotiations and said that the US is ready to step back from these negotiations if they do not proceed, and we don't see any developments in them. It's been very frustrating for the US mediation team, who previously had a promise from Donald Trump that he would end this war in 24 hours. That, of course, has not happened. And we've seen this conflict go on and aggression increase as time has gone on. We've seen deadly attacks from Russia on civilians over the past few months, one including in the city of Sumy, where we saw a massive 34 civilians killed in the eastern Ukrainian city of Sumy. Donald Trump has been widely spoken mainly on his Truth Social platform and on Air Force One about both Volodymyr Zelensky but also Vladimir Putin. The US president has received a lot of criticism and for warming to Vladimir Putin, which of course his predecessor was a staunch opposition to the Russian president and his actions in Ukraine. But today, the two warring sides meet for a second round of direct peace talks, something that we thought we were so far from. But now the two meet in Istanbul, mediated by Turkey, where they had their first round of direct peace talks back in 2022, when the war first broke out. And we will see how this develops. We move on to our next story. We are joined by Daniel Wagner, CEO of Country Risk Solutions, located in Colorado. Daniel, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Pleasure to have you as always. This is obviously the second round of peace talks. Judging by the dialogue surrounding this second round, how do you think it's going to go? We obviously saw a possible meeting between Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky. Before that didn't happen. We saw low-level delegations sent first by Moscow and then subsequently by Ukraine. What hopes do you have for this round of peace talks in Istanbul?
I have to say I'm not very optimistic, and I can't imagine why anyone would be. The two largest attacks of the war have just happened in the last few days, perpetrated by either side on the other. So it seems like they're almost going through the motions by agreeing to meet. I can't imagine that they have any grand ambition for reaching a meaningful or long-lasting ceasefire when they're both attacking each other with such ferocity, and it's happened just in the last 24 hours. So I don't, I wouldn't discourage them from meeting, but I don't expect anything much to happen.
Yes, and Daniel, obviously, Russia is set to give Ukraine a memo of its key demands during the war. Now, there's no doubt that there'll be territorial concessions in that memo. What kind of things do you think that Russia is going to expect from Ukraine? Now it controls about 20% of Ukrainian territory since the war began.
Yeah, I don't think that Putin and the Russia side has changed their list of demands much at all, nor do I expect it to change much in the future. They want to retain the territory that they've got. They're positioning themselves to have a stronger negotiating position in these peace talks to the extent that they continue. And I would be very surprised if they make any meaningful concessions. As for the Ukrainian side, well, they've already said that they're looking for a long-term, even permanent ceasefire. And they've said that they're willing to give up some of the land that has been lost. I don't know that they're willing to give up everything that has been lost, but of course that's what a negotiation is for.
Yes, and obviously on the backdrop of this we have Donald Trump, the man who promised to end this war in 24 hours. That hasn't happened, but he is now expressing frustration over the lack of progress of these negotiations. As you've said, hostilities have risen. We have seen some of the largest attacks of the entire 3-year war since these negotiations started. How do you assess Donald Trump's actions and ability to negotiate an end to this war?
Well, Trump sees himself as a peacemaker. He sees himself as someone who can bring parties together, and that's what he's really trying to do. He's gotten so frustrated with Putin because Putin isn't cooperating at all. And I guess it remains to be seen if in the next 24 hours, either of the parties end up walking away from the table, because it wouldn't surprise me at all if they basically say there's no point to meeting. If they do continue to meet and there is some sign that both sides are sincere, I suppose there's a hope and an expectation that it might last a while. But again, I think Trump's position is you can bring them together, but you can't necessarily make them, dive into the water for peace. So let's see what happens.
Yes, Daniel, thank you very much. You are staying with us. We now move on to our next story in the United States, where in a shocking turn of events in Boulder, Colorado, a vigil for Israeli hostages was shattered when a man shouted "Free Palestine" and threw a Molotov cocktail into the crowd, injuring 6 people. Authorities are investigating the incident as a targeted terror attack with possible hate crime motives. Here's the Boulder police chief sharing initial details.
Very preliminary information about an attack that occurred here in downtown Boulder. The initial callers indicated that there was a man with a weapon and that people were being set on fire. The initial response by our officers, we were on scene very quickly. When we arrived, we encountered multiple victims that were injured with injuries consistent with burns and other injuries.
FBI Special Agent Mark Michalek from the Denver field office stated that the suspect, identified as Mohammed Soliman, he was hospitalized following the attack. FBI Director Kash Patel also called the event a targeted terror attack, while Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser labeled it a possible hate crime due to the nature of the targeted group. Boulder Police Chief Stephen Redfern said there is no evidence of additional suspects involved. The attack occurred on Pearl Street Mall, a busy pedestrian area near the University of Colorado, during an event hosted by Run for Their Lives, a group raising awareness about hostages taken after the October the 7th attack on Israel. Now let's turn to a resident for their account.
My coworkers explain me what happened. So I hear or they explain me someone throw a Molotov cocktail for the protest, but that's it. I all hear. Yeah. I feel a little upset because it's supposed we have in a country in the first world, so that these things is supposed can happen, because in my country is something like that is very regular, because I came from Latin America, so you can see those things every day. But here, looking at other things, I'm very, very close to my work. Is very, very scared.
We're once again joined by Daniel Wagner to discuss this further, who joins us from Colorado, the state where the incident occurred. Daniel, have you got any more information? Obviously, you join us from Colorado and very aware that is a big state, but have you got any more information? Have you heard anything that has occurred during this attack, why it happened, etc.?
Well, let me just say to begin with that I'm a native of Denver. Boulder is about 30 minutes from Denver, and I lived in Boulder for a couple of years. Wow. The place where this where this attack occurred is the municipal courthouse, as you said, on the Pearl Street Mall, which is the most famous place in Boulder. Boulder is a place where people go to climb mountains and meditate and practice yoga. It's a very peaceful place. So you would almost think this would be the last place in the United States where you would see this kind of an attack. But it's also worth pointing out that there are many places in America where you have people who are pro-Israeli on one side of the street saying what they want to say, and people across the street who are pro-Palestinian or pro-Hamas on the other side saying what they want to say. And they generally do what they want to do in peace. So this is unusual, but we're seeing a pattern now develop, which is with all the rhetoric that's going on and all the stuff on social media and all the extremists on both sides of this equation, I guess clashes are bound to happen. The person who was arrested is originally of Egyptian descent. And I think that's interesting, but the attack from a few days ago in the States also was from someone who was not from the Middle East. This is the killing of those two Israeli embassy employees in Washington, D.C. last week. That guy was of Latino descent, I believe. So I don't think there's necessarily any rhyme nor reason why someone takes a free Palestine position and then gets violent with that.
Daniel, political violence, if you can call this that, isn't new to the United States. But there is a increasing trend of ideologically motivated violence. You just cited the attack that happened a few days ago in regard to those two Israeli embassy workers that lived in Washington. But in relation to international conflicts, what can you tell us about the state of the United States and how divided people are politically when it comes to this issue?
Yeah, I mean, there's a political element to all of this, whether one is pro-Israel, anti-Israel, etc. It isn't necessarily a Democrat or Republican. It's emblematic, though, is that people are just so divided on so many issues in this country that there doesn't seem to be a middle ground on much of anything. It seems like extremists on both sides sort of control the narrative, and the people in the middle who are wanting perhaps to take a more commonsensical approach to a given issue, they get drowned out by the extremists on both sides. And this is certainly consistent with that theme.
Yes, and Daniel, how do you see the Trump administration responding to this? Do you see him playing on it? How do you see him reacting? We obviously saw a staunch opposition to when the previous attack happened on two Israeli embassy workers. We've seen him respond to pro-Palestine protests at Harvard University, Columbia University, universities across the US. How do you think the Trump administration is going to react to this attack?
I think they're going to, Mr. Trump in his first time in the presidency, of course, had an issue with Muslims more generally. It wouldn't surprise me if he takes this opportunity to say something anti-Muslim, although he may not. Of course, viewing himself in this peacemaker role in various conflicts around the world, I suppose he doesn't want to necessarily lash out at any particular group. But he's clearly, done a number of things that are against people who oppose Israel or are anti-Semitic. And I would imagine that sort of approach is going to be consistent with what we'll see from him in the future.
Daniel Wagner, thank you so much for joining us. Pleasure to have you on the programme. We now move over to Europe, where Karol Nawrocki has emerged victorious in Poland's presidential runoff election, according to the final official results. Nawrocki, a historian and candidate backed by the right-wing Law and Justice Party, secured 50.89% of the vote, edging out Liberal Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski, who received 49.11%. Nawrocki's campaign focused on prioritising Polish economic and social interests, expressing caution over Ukraine's NATO membership due to security risks with Russia. His victory signals a potential shift towards nationalist policies and a stronger alignment with like-minded leaders in Central Europe. Nawrocki promised to defend Poland's sovereignty and continue supporting national defence while maintaining a balanced foreign policy. This election outcome will have significant implications for Poland's future, both domestically and on the international stage. We move back over to the Middle East for our next story. At least 31 Palestinians were killed and over 170 were injured near a US-backed aid distribution site in Gaza on Sunday, according to Gaza's civil defense. Israeli military and the aid organization deny the incident occurred. This comes amid continued humanitarian crises as Gaza faces risks of famine after months of blockades, according to the United Nations. This is what the Israeli army had to say about the incident.
Doing his best is almost to stop us from doing so. He is spreading rumors, fake news. He is trying bluntly and violently to stop the people of Gaza from reaching those distribution centers. We will investigate each and one of those incidents and each and one of those allegations.
The new US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has distributed millions of meals, but the aid rollout has been chaotic at limited distribution centres. Hamas has expressed willingness to resume indirect ceasefire talks with Qatar and Egypt, working to bridge the gap between Hamas and Israel. The proposed deal includes a 60-day truce, aid access and reopening border crossings to address the humanitarian crisis. Meanwhile, US Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee criticised France's push for a Palestinian state, mocking it as a move to carve out a piece of the French Riviera. France and Saudi Arabia are co-chairing a UN conference to revive the two-state solution, which is opposed by Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We stay in the region. Saudi Arabia's Foreign Minister, Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al-Saud, criticised Israel for blocking an Arab minister's delegation from visiting the occupied West Bank. Speaking after meetings in Amman with counterparts from Jordan, Egypt and Bahrain, he called Israel's refusal a sign of extremism and rejection of peace. Let's listen in to the comment made by Saudi Arabia.
رفض إسرائيل لزيارة هذه اللجنة إلى الضفة ثم اضطرنا لتأجيلها هو فقط تجسيد وتأكيد كما ذكرتم لتطرفها ولرفضها أي محاولات جدية لمسلك السلام ومسلك الدبلوماسية. واضح أنهم لا يريدون إلا العنف، وهذا يزيدنا عزيمة الحقيقة في مضاعفة جهودنا الدبلوماسية في المجتمع الدولي لمواجهة هذه العنجهية ولدحضها بإذن الله.
However, Israel said the delegation intended to hold a provocative meeting promoting a Palestinian state, leading to the trip's cancellation. This would have been the first visit by a top Saudi official to the West Bank in recent years. Israel faces pressure from the United Nations and European countries supporting a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We move on once again. Israeli drone strikes killed 2 Hezbollah operatives in southern Lebanon on Sunday. The Israel Defense Forces confirmed. The first strike hit a member of Hezbollah's anti-tank unit in Arnoun, just 5 kilometers from the Israeli border. Lebanese authorities have confirmed 1 fatality in that attack, describing it as an Israeli enemy strike. The second strike targeted a vehicle on the Debel Road in the Bint Jebel district, killing a member of Hezbollah's rocket unit in the Ash-Shab. An additional strike in Beit Leaf wounded 1 person, according to Lebanon's health ministry, while the Israeli military did not comment on this incident. The IDF has stated that the strike near Sidon eliminated Mohammed Jafar Manar Assad Ardallah, a Hezbollah member responsible for deploying the group's communication systems across Lebanon. These attacks come despite a ceasefire agreed last November, as Israel continues near-daily operations in southern Lebanon. Meanwhile, Iraqi Prime Minister has condemned the attacks, stating the following.
نجدد في إدانتنا للاعتداءات الإسرائيلية المتكررة للسيادة اللبنانية ونعدها خرقا للقانون الدولي. نكرر تأكيدنا على ضرورة تطبيق القرار الأممي 1701 بالكامل، والمجتمع الدولي مطالب وملزم بأداء التزاماته في التطبيق الكامل غير الانتقائي للقرار من أجل دعم الاستقرار.
The Israeli army says it intercepted a missile from Yemen. Air raid sirens sounded in Jerusalem and several cities before the inception. Moments later, Yemen's Houthi rebels claimed responsibility. They say they launched a hypersonic ballistic missile targeting Ben Gurion Airport. The group's spokesman, Yahya Sari, also announced 3 drone attacks on Jaffa, Ashdod and al-Rush. Let's listen in to Yahya Sari.
القوة الصاروخية في القوات المسلحة اليمنية عملية عسكرية نوعية استهدفت مطار اللد في منطقة يافا المحتلة، وذلك بصاروخ باليستي فرط صوتي، وقد حققت العملية هدفها بنجاح بفضل الله، وتسببت في هروب الملايين من قطعان الصهاينة الغاصبين إلى الملاجئ وتوقف حركة
Israel confirms the missile was shot down. No casualties or damage were reported. The Houthis say the strike was carried out in solidarity with Palestinians as Israel operations continue in Gaza. This latest launch adds to a long series of long-range attacks from Yemen that have resumed since the end of a temporary ceasefire in March. While Israel's air defenses successfully intercepted the missile, its range and target once again highlight the widening scope of the conflict. Security forces remain on high alert. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more international news updates.